Senator Cruz?
You know, Melissa, I'm sorry for the challenges you're facing. There are many people in America struggling with exactly what you are in the wreckage of Obamacare, with skyrocketing premiums, with deductibles that are unaffordable, and with really limited care. And I will commend Bernie for his candor. I mean, his view all along was that we need government-run and government-controlled health care for everyone. And indeed, as he said here tonight, he thinks other countries do it a lot better than America. He often points to Canada, the United Kingdom. He says, why do we pay more? Well, there's a reason we pay more than those countries. We get a lot more and a lot better health care. Let me give you some basic facts. As I noticed in all the Democratic primary debates, there was no discussion of the facts on the other side. The United States, population controlled, delivers 3 times as many mammograms as Europe, 2.5 times the number of MRI scans, and 31% more C-sections. We provide more health care. Not only that, in the United Kingdom, for example, wait times. In 2013, you waited 72 days for cataract surgery. You waited 89 days for hip replacement, 95 days for knee replacement. There are 3.7 million people in the United Kingdom right now on a waiting list waiting for health care. Whenever you put government in charge of health care, what it means is they ration. They decide you get care and you don't. I don't think the government has any business telling you you're not entitled to receive health care. That's why I think the answer is not more of Obamacare, more government control, more of what got us in this mess. Rather, the answer is empower you, give you choices, lower prices, lower premiums, lower deductibles, empower you and put you back in charge of your health care.
So, unless you want to agree to a single-payer system,
I would love to respond.
You're not going to support that. I know that.
Well, actually, what I still will say, Bernie, is I would love for us to work together going after Big Pharma. And in particular, taking on the FDA. Right now, it takes $2 billion to approve a new drug. Now, I've introduced legislation to reform the FDA process so that new health care, so that we can be curing diseases and we can be helping people. I would encourage you to join me in that legislation. Join me in Right to Try, so that if someone has a terminal disease, the government won't tell them, you can't try this life-saving medicine because we forbid it.
Gentlemen, we could do this. We could do this all night. We're going to get to pharma.
I'm willing to look at it. If you're willing to look at taking on pharma, which is the greediest of many greedy corporate interests in Washington, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to introduce legislation to have Medicare negotiate prices with the pharmaceutical industry. I am going to introduce again legislation to allow Americans to buy less expensive medicine in Canada, the UK, and other countries. Let's take on the greed of pharma, substantially lower prescription drug costs.
And Dana, let me make a response to this, because this is a good discussion. The whole point of having an extended discussion is to, as you know, with drug reimportation, bringing in drugs from Canada and other countries, just a couple of weeks ago on the Senate floor, I voted with you.
You voted for my amendment.
In support of that, in support of allowing drug reimportation. It was the right thing to do, but I'll tell you, a much bigger barrier than that is the fact that, you know, in the last 20 years, the FDA has approved only 3 child cancer drugs in 20 years because the burdens are so great. I introduced legislation that said, if a drug is approved in another major country, if it's approved in Europe or Japan or our major respected partners, that the FDA's got 30 days to approve it here. We shouldn't be telling people with life-threatening diseases, you can't do everything you can to save your lives. That would be a great thing. We'd make news if you and I joined up on that.
But that is not the major problem.
I fear that if I don't have Obamacare, if I'm not covered, then my pre-existing condition of breast cancer and remaining treatments would make it difficult for me to afford insurance. Senator Cruz, what can you do to protect people like me who are alive because of Obamacare?
Well, Neil, thank you for asking that question. And how long have you been diagnosed with breast cancer?
I was diagnosed on April 25th, 2016.
Oh, wow. Well, you're doing great. You know, our prayers are with you. I'll tell you, my mom had breast cancer. And my mom was diagnosed in 2000. I sat by her hospital bed as she went through 2 surgeries, and it's a horrible disease, but 16 years later, thank God she is a survivor. And I will tell you, our medical innovation has been incredible dealing with breast cancer, and so all of us, our prayers and thoughts are with you.
Thank you.
You know, you asked about people who get sick and not wanting your insurance canceled, not wanting your premiums to go up. That's absolutely right. That is absolutely right. And if you look at every proposal that's been submitted, every significant proposal that's been submitted to replace Obamacare, to fix the problems in the healthcare system after Obamacare is gotten rid of, all of them protect people in your situations. All of them prohibit insurance companies from canceling someone because they got sick. They prohibit insurance companies from jacking up the insurance rates because they got sick or injured. Look, the whole point of insurance is none of us know if we're going to wake up tomorrow like you did earlier last year and discover we have a terrible disease. And we buy insurance, we pay our premiums just so we know that we'll be able to take care of that situation. So absolutely we got to fix it, and I'm confident that we're going to.
Senator Sanders, response?
Ted, I cannot believe what you just said. It's in direct contradiction to everything you ran for president on. What Ted has said is he wants to get rid of all federal mandates. Did you say that 100 times?
I didn't say it once.
I will, said Ted Cruz, I will get
hundreds of times on the campaign trail, yes, we should repeal every word of Obamacare. But if you listen to the next sentence, I always said, we're not done yet with health care reform. And we do that. We need health care reform and the principles of health care reform. They should expand competition. They should empower patients. And they should keep government from getting between you and your doctor. And I talked about all sorts of common sense ideas to do just that. And as I said, a proposal that is consistent in virtually every one of the pieces of Republican legislation that's been filed is a prohibition on insurance companies canceling people because they got sick. And you know, Bernie, it's easy to say to people, gosh, you're going to lose your coverage. What do the Democrats say to the 6 million people who had their health insurance canceled?
Ted, you're a good lawyer and you use words well.
Thank you.
What you just said is cancel your insurance. Cancel your insurance, okay? That's good. But what happens if tomorrow you wake up and you go to the doctor and you discover that you have cancer? All right? You just discovered it. And the insurance companies say, hey, you're not a good deal for us. We can't make money off of you. You will not get that health insurance. So I think when people like Ted talk about repealing Obamacare, repealing government mandates, this is a government mandate, and it is a damn good mandate and a humane mandate.
And Senator Cruz, if you would answer Naosh's specific question.
I did multiple times, Dana.
Okay, so you are saying that she will continue to have health care, she and others who have pre-existing conditions, and you're going to make sure that that is a mandate and a requirement in whatever legislation you support?
What I've said is virtually all of the Republican legislation that has been filed that the Democrats have opposed maintains a continuity of coverage so that insurance companies can't cancel policies. And, you know, the question I asked a minute ago that Bernie chose not to answer is, what do the Democrats say to the 6 million people who had their insurance policies canceled, who got a notification in the mail that you don't get to see your doctors anymore, and not just the people who were canceled. There are people all over this country who can't afford health insurance because of Obamacare, who the deductibles are so high, the premiums are so high, they say, you know what, my family, we can't make it on this. And, you know, you talk about the people covered by Obamacare. Here's something most people don't know. Most of the people covered by Obamacare are on Medicaid. They jammed a bunch more people in Medicaid. I'll tell you what happens. People on Medicaid have markedly worse health outcomes than people with private insurance.
Senator, we're
I'd like to see a lot more people on private insurance able to be insured for health care rather than, but it's relevant to, he's saying people are going to lose their health care. If you want health care, we want as many people as possible to be able to afford insurance policies that protect you when you get sick. I think the question you asked is a very good one, and you're right that choices have gone down dramatically. Indeed, I don't know if the cameras can see this, but in 70% of the counties in America, on Obamacare exchanges, you have a choice of 1 or 2 health insurance plans. That's it. 70% of the counties in America. It's interesting. You look at this map. This also very much looks like the electoral map that elected Donald Trump. It's really quite striking that the communities that have been hammered by this disaster of a law said enough already. Now, Bernie likes talking about a public option. That's another way of saying government control of your health care. It's socialized medicine, and what does it mean? Every country where it's been applied, you've seen rationing, you've seen government deciding, especially seniors. Seniors, you don't get the health care you need. Now, Bernie mentions Canada quite a bit. I know quite a bit about Canadian health care. I was born there. You know, Bernie, that may be the best argument against your position is you know, look what it produced.
Look at the results. Yeah, that's right.
But, you know, people vote with their feet. In 2014, over 52,000 Canadians left Canada to get health care in the United States and other countries. I'm reminded of a comment Ronald Reagan used to say about East Berlin, about the Berlin Wall. He said, the funny thing the leftists never seem to notice, the machine guns all point one direction. Everyone was fleeing communism and coming to freedom. If you look at socialized medicine, people leave their tens and hundreds of thousands every year, leave socialized medicine countries because they want to get a hip replacement, a knee replacement. You know, the governor of one of the Canadian provinces came to America to get heart surgery, and he was a governor in Canada. And by the way, in your home state of Vermont, your hospitals advertise with Canadian flags, come to American hospitals, you'll get better health care. I don't want to mess up our health care. I want patients, all of us, to be in charge of our health care, not government deciding what health care we get.
Let's now turn to the effects of Obamacare on small businesses. And with us to discuss that is LaRonda Hunter, who owns 5 hair salons in Texas. LaRonda?
Hello. Under the controls of Obamacare, my business has been restricted from expansion. I'm from Fort Worth, Texas. I own 5 fantastic Sam's hair salons. We employ between 45 and 48 employees. My original plan was to open more salons and employ more people. However, under Obamacare, I am restricted because it requires me to furnish health insurance if I employ more than 50 people. Unfortunately, the profit margin in my industry is very thin, and I'm not a wealthy person, so it's impossible for me to grow my business. My question to you, Senator Sanders, is how do I grow my business? How do I employ more Americans without either raising the prices to my customers or lowering wages to my employees?
Rhonda?
LaRonda.
LaRonda. Okay. You own 5 salons.
That's correct.
And you employ close to 50 people.
Just under.
And what kind of health insurance do you provide to them?
None.
You provide no health insurance to them?
Correct.
Let me give you an answer you will not be happy with. And that is, I think that for businesses that employ 50 people or more, given the nature of our dysfunctional healthcare system right now, where most people do get their health insurance through the places that they work, I'm sorry. I think that in America today, everybody should have health care. And if you have more than 50 people, you know what? I'm afraid to tell you, but I think you will have to provide health insurance.
So my question is, how do I do that without raising my prices to my customers or lowering wages to my employees?
You see, the difficulty is, and I'm not much of an expert on hair dressing in general, and certainly in Fort Worth.
I'm just one of small businesses.
I know. But my guess is one of the problems that we have is there may be somebody else in Fort Worth who is providing decent health insurance to their employees. And they are in an unfair competitive situation regarding you. You can compete and maybe charge lower prices, get business, while they, on the other hand, may be providing decent health insurance.
I think you'll find the profit margin in my entire industry about the same.
I certainly don't know, about hair salons in Fort Worth. But I do believe, to be honest with you, that if you have more than 50 people, yes, you should be providing health insurance.
Senator Cruz?
LaRonda, thank you for sharing your story. And it's good to see a fellow Texan here. And, I've got to say, I've got a very different view than Bernie. I think actually what Bernie told you is the same thing President Obama said. It's the same thing Democrats have said, which is that you, the small business, you're apparently a bad actor because you're not allowed to manufacture money. Let me introduce you all to 2 terms that have become really common: 29ers and 49ers. 29ers are the millions of people across this country that have been forced into part-time work, that used to have full-time employment, and are now working 29 hours a week because Obamacare kicks in at 30 hours a week. And a lot of them are people, they're single moms, they're teenagers, they're immigrants, they're people who are struggling, and then 49ers. There are millions of small businesses in the exact situation you're in. A couple of months ago, I was out in West Texas, was visiting a dairy farmer, driving around the dairy farm. I got to say, interesting smells on the dairy farm. Kind of reminds me of Washington. But the farmer brought up, he said, you know how many employees I have? I said, no. He said, I've got 49. He said, you know why I have 49? I said, yes, I do. Because Obamacare kicks in at 50, and he said, I could hire 20 or 30 more employees right now, but Obamacare would bankrupt my business, and that's millions of small businesses. So we're here at GW. Let me speak for a minute to all the young people. When you come out of college with way too many student loans, my guess is you'd like to get a job. And millions of small businesses being told by the Democrats, tough luck, we don't care if it drives you out of business, that's taken away opportunity, and it's hurting, in particular, the most vulnerable. It's one of the most damaging things about Obamacare.
Senator Sanders?
LaRonda, let me ask you a question. What happens if one of your employees becomes ill? What happens? What happens if one of your employees, as happens in every part of the country, gets diabetes, gets cancer? What do they do if they don't have any health insurance?
I can't really answer that question, but I can tell you that because the premiums have gone up so much this year, and because I don't qualify for any kind of government subsidies, I don't have, for the first time in my life, insurance. It's just not affordable. Unfortunately, the prices of my services just don't warrant it.
Let me just say this, two things. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, it is absolutely true that the cost of premiums are going up. No argument. They went up even higher during the period of George W. Bush. So it's not like, oh, gee, for the first time in American history, premiums are going up. Number two, Ted mentioned part-time work, the 29 as well. There are fewer part-time employees today than there were before Obamacare, okay? So here is the point. The bottom line is, with the situation you described is honestly absurd. You should not be going around without health insurance. Your employees should not be going around without health insurance. We should not be spending twice as much per person on health care as do the people of any other nation. Please join me and fight for a Medicare for all program. Are you looking forward, by the way? I'm not going to ask you your age. Won't do that. But are you looking forward maybe when you get to 65 to get Medicare? Would that be of help to your family?
I expect that will probably happen.
Good. Well, I certainly hope it does, and I hope Medicare is still there, despite the efforts of Senator Cruz and others, so that when you at least reach 65, you will be able to get a decent health insurance program.
Well, Bernie, since apparently I'm now trying to kill the elderly, let me ask you a question. When you heard that her premiums had skyrocketed, that she can't afford health insurance, you kind of said, well, premiums always go up. I mean, let me ask you, why did President Obama look in the eyes of the American people and promise LaRonda that her health insurance premiums would go down $2,500 a year? Was he telling the truth when he said that? And were you and the other Democrats telling the truth when you echoed his promise to the American people?
Well, they're sitting around not providing health care. They're working on paperwork, driving you crazy when you bring forth a claim. So we have to figure out how we have a simple system that guarantees health care to all people. When we do that, you and your employees will all have health insurance.
Well, there is an area actually where we agree, which is there is way too much paperwork with health care. There's way too much complexity. I'll tell you, when you talk to doctors, when you talk to nurses, they say, I don't get to practice health care anymore. I spend all my time filling out paperwork, all my time. Now, where the paperwork comes from is the government. It comes from Obamacare. In fact, there's some amazing stats I'm going to go back and get because they're really quite powerful. If you look at the paperwork impact, Obamacare's rules alone, and by the way, the Obamacare rules are 20,000 pages. They're taller than 7 feet tall. They generate $51 billion in costs and more than 172 million hours of paperwork compliance. And let me put that in perspective. What does that mean? That would take 86,200 employees working full-time, 2,000 hours a year, to complete 1 year of new paperwork under Obamacare. That's roughly the entire population of Miami Beach, Florida, doing nothing but filling out Obamacare forms. If you want your doctor to get back to caring for you, if you want to drive down costs, get government out of the business of dictating and controlling health care.
Well, Ted is right. There is far too much paperwork. Some of it is government. But you know what some of it is also? It is insurance companies. Every American who has filed a claim has the experience of fighting with the health insurance companies to make sure that they get what they are entitled to. Doctors have to spend half of their lives arguing with the insurance companies as to whether or not they can prescribe the medicine their patients need or provide the therapy that their patients need. Huge amount of waste. That is why we need a simple system. And as Americans, Ted, we're going to have to make a very fundamental decision. Very simple. Is health care a right of all people? Is it or not? Ted doesn't think it is. I do think it is. And then if we agree, and I think most Americans do, that it is a right, how do you provide health care to all people with high quality in a cost-effective way? I happen to believe that Medicare is a popular program. It works well. Right now, you get it at 65. I think every American.
Senator Sanders, I want to pick the discussion up right there, if I may. Senator Cruz.
Dan, let me make a real quick point, just because I think it's nice having the back and forth and the
lovely,
live. But
absolutely.
One thing Bernie said that I think suggests maybe an area we could work together. You were talking about paperwork from insurance companies. I agree. There's way too much paperwork from insurance companies. I'd like insurance companies to have less power and patients to have more power. So maybe you and I could agree on a common sense reform of allowing LaRhonda to purchase health insurance of any of the 50 states. Right now, she's a Texan. It's illegal for her to purchase health insurance anywhere else. That would give her choice. If she doesn't like what the Texas companies are offering, she can go to Oklahoma, she can go to Florida, she can go to any other state. That creates a 50-state national marketplace. It drives down costs. It increases choices. Why don't we stand together against the insurance companies and agree on that reform?
Well, I think standing together for a Medicare for all single-payer system is a lot better idea.
Okay.
Because when you have the idea that Ted was talking about, this is a race to the bottom. And what you're going to end up with, some insurance company in Mississippi or someplace, they're going to provide you insurance. But you think your deductibles are high now, it will be a lot higher. Look, Ted, and you're right, this is a good discussion, all right? And here is the issue. Ted, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Is every American entitled, and I underlined that word, to health care as a right of being an American? Yes or no?
You know, I'm glad you asked that. You know, right is a word you use a lot. Let's talk about what rights are. Rights mean you have a right for government not to mess with you, for government not to do things with you. If you look at the Bill of Rights, the Bill of Rights, free speech means the government can't silence you when you're speaking. Religious liberty means the government can't control who you worship, what your faith is. The Second Amendment means the government can't take away your guns. Those are rights. You know what the Declaration of Independence said? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So what is a right? Is access to health care. What is a right is choosing your own doctor. And if you believe health care is a right, why on earth did you help write Obamacare that caused 6 million people to have their health insurance canceled, that had them lose their doctors, and had people like LaRhonda who can't get health insurance, can't afford premiums? You're denying her what you say is her right.
I want to bring it back to a subject.
Let me respond to that real quickly. I know this gentleman has a question.
As long as you're not going to talk about the estate tax.
What Bernie said real quickly, I want to respond to just briefly. Which, you know, it was interesting in the course of the campaign last year. I would encounter young people all over the country. There were a lot of young people who supported our campaign, a lot of young people who supported Bernie's. And I would talk with different people supporting Bernie. And I'd say to them, typically young people, I'd say, you know what, I agree with Bernie. And they'd sort of look at me, they'd be startled. They'd say, what are you talking about? I said, listen, Bernie talks about how Washington is corrupt, how both parties are corrupt, how both parties are in bed with big business and big money, and it is a corrupt system benefiting the special interest. I agree absolutely and entirely. And what I tell folks is where I disagree is in his solution. If the problem is government is corrupt, why on earth would you want more power in Washington? I want to take power out of Washington and empower the people. When it comes to taxes, what I want to see is a simple flat tax of 10% for everyone and abolish the IRS. That ends the power of the lobbyists. It ends the power of Washington. That's a solution that empowers the people.
We have a question on what will happen to that coverage from Maria Shahid Rowe, who was pregnant with her second child. Maria?
Thank you. I'm a nursing student at the Medical University of South Carolina, and I'm concerned about the implications that repealing the Affordable Care Act will have on women's health, and specifically for pregnant women. So I'm 5 months pregnant, and I actually qualified for Medicaid due to being a full-time student. My husband works for a church. We live on a very modest income at the moment. Senator Cruz, what policies do you have in place to protect pregnant women from losing their health coverage, either due to being considered having a pre-existing condition or from being charged higher insurance premiums than men?
Well, congratulations on your new baby. Is it a boy or girl?
It's a surprise.
Oh, well, wonderful. and you said you have an older child? What's your older child?
We have a 2-year-old son.
What's his name?
Samson.
Oh, well, maybe you'll have Delilah, and that'll be, how wonderful, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Heidi and I have two little girls at home, and it is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Listen, maternity coverage is incredibly important. But here's how Obamacare worked. You had a lot of politicians in Washington who said, we're going to mandate every coverage on earth. And it sounds really good. I had a conversation a couple of years ago with a gentleman in Amarillo, Texas, who told me the story about his 101-year-old aunt who had just had her insurance canceled.
What's her name?
And she said the reason it was canceled was that it didn't cover maternity care.
Maria.
Now, this fellow laughed and said, you know what? My aunt is 101 years old. She doesn't really need maternity coverage right now. We should have a system, I believe, where you can choose to get the policies that meet your needs. And the impact, especially for young people, of all the mandated coverage. You know, it's interesting. The Democrats' view, they're big on talking about insurance coverage. But it's a little bit like giving everyone a bus ticket when there are no buses. What we should care about is access to health care, not just insurance per se. And what's happened under Obamacare is that millions of people can't afford it. We should be concerned about people being able to afford health insurance, and that means giving them the choice in 50 states to choose a policy. In your instance, you would choose a policy that had maternity coverage, but someone else who right now kind of can't afford it might choose a different policy. And when government mandates it, those choices go away.
Senator Sanders, your response?
What Ted is really telling you is they will not guarantee coverage for you. And not every pregnancy is planned. And if a pregnant woman before Obamacare, you know what you would consider to be? A pre-existing condition. And now, why would an insurance company want to provide care to you when having a baby is a fairly expensive proposition? You don't make money doing that. And Ted keeps talking about these mandates. So let's be clear again what Senator Cruz and his Republican friends want to do. They do not want to guarantee that women who become pregnant will be able to get the health care and the prenatal care that they need, which is a terrible thing, by the way, because we have one of the highest infant mortality rates in the industrialized world. He says to young people who today are on their parents' program, you're out, you're on your own after you leave college. He says that if you come down with a terrible illness and you're ending up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, your insurance company can now tell you that there is a limit to what they will pay. And he is telling 20 million people who gained health insurance under Obamacare, sorry, you're out on the streets. Bottom line is, once again, the discussion, if you really think about the kinds of discussion that we're having, it is an absurd discussion for the wealthiest nation in the history of the world.
Senator Sanders, let me follow up on that.
If I may. I want to respond to that real briefly.
Please, go ahead.
You know, it's interesting sometimes the rhetoric that our friends on the left like to say that anyone who doesn't support government control of our health care somehow doesn't like and fit in whatever population you're talking about. But let's again go back to facts, and let's talk about young people. You know, there's no group in America, I think, that's been hurt more by Obamacare than young people. Young people were left on the chopping block. Let's talk about some basic stats. A recent study found that the Obamacare mandates, what Bernie just sang an ode to, have increased, the three costliest mandates have increased premiums for younger people by 44%. Without those mandates, the typical 21-year-old would pay $1,100 a year less. If you're 21, think about whether it would be easier to afford health care if it cost $1,100 a year less. And let's talk about some specifics. Before Obamacare, the most affordable plan that was available for a 30-year-old Texan, woman was $470 a year. Today, under Obamacare, the cheapest plan that's available for a healthy 30-year-old woman in Fort Worth is $3,236. It's gone from $470 to $3,000, over $3,200. That's why young people are hurting. And what Obamacare did is it jacked up the rates on all the young people. Why do you think there's an individual mandate? It's to force young people to pay really high rates to subsidize the rest of the system. And if you don't pay it, the IRS fines you. And you know, over 6 million people are fined each year by the IRS under Obamacare.
Senator, we're going to get to the Senator Sanders. Let's get back to America and to the Affordable Care Act. Throughout your campaign, you said the taxes should go up on the rich, not the middle class, and yet millions of Americans who chose not to get health care are forced to pay a tax penalty. So families of four are paying up to $2,000 per year for failing to purchase coverage. Many say that they can't afford the premium, so it's just cheaper for them to pay the penalty than get health care. So is it fair to put this tax burden on families?
No, it's not. But on the other hand, is it fair to not raise the revenue that we need to provide the kinds of benefits that we are providing? That is a way to do it. I don't think it's a particularly good way. I disagree with Ted, who wants to give, according to the Wall Street Journal and many other publications, incredible tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires. I think in the wealthiest country in the world, we should raise funds in a progressive way where the very rich are now doing phenomenally well. Yes, I do believe they should be asked to pay more in taxes, and I think we should use that money and other mechanisms to provide health care to all people.
Senator, on that very topic, the top 1% are paying a lot more in taxes under Obamacare. But if you repeal it, will the top 1%, the wealthiest Americans, effectively get a tax cut?
Well, Dana, let me point out that Bernie acknowledged that 6.5 million Americans are paying Obamacare tax fines because they can't afford insurance. So they can't afford health insurance, and then the IRS comes in and fines them. And he says, gosh, I don't agree with that. And yet throughout the Democratic debate, Bernie says he helped write Obamacare that imposes these fines on people. I think it's wrong to be fining people. But let me make a broader point on taxes, which is many times in this debate, Bernie has talked about providing health care for free from the government. You know what? The simplest principle in economics is Tonstoffel. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. The liberal-leaning Urban Institute scored Bernie's health plan, concluded it would cost $2.5 trillion in the first year and $32 trillion over 10 years. Now, how much is that? Trillions is a big number. It's not clear what that is. Let me put it in perspective. All of the federal income taxes we pay today are about $1.5 trillion a year. $2.5 trillion means every one of us paying income taxes would have to about triple what you pay in income taxes to get an additional $2.5 trillion. Now, Bernie, no doubt, is going to come back and say, no, 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 no. None of you are going to pay. Just the rich. Well, how about if we took every person that makes over $1 million a year and confiscated 100% of their income, took every penny that they make? That would raise only enough money to fund Bernie's plan for 5 months. Here's another idea. How about if the government confiscated the assets of Apple, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and ExxonMobil? If it came in, illegally seized those companies and sold them, that would pay for 1 year of Bernie's plan. If you don't want to see your taxes triple, in addition to the wait list, in addition to the rationing, in addition to fewer MRIs and mammograms to worse care, then you don't want to see Bernie's Medicaid for all. You want to see cheap, affordable health care that you can choose that puts you in control.
Cruz?
I want to thank Bernie for being here and for being a vigorous and honest debater. He believes what he believes, and he represents it well. and I want to thank each of you for spending so much time addressing this critically important issue. You know, I'd like to take a minute and actually ask the people here if the cameras could turn for a moment to the folks in the audience. I want to ask you, how many of you here in the last 6 years have seen your health insurance premiums or your deductibles go up? Let me ask another question. How many of you here know somebody, including yourself, who's had your insurance policy canceled in the last 6 years? If you look at these hands across the room, this is why people are so unhappy with Obamacare. Because it isn't working. Because it was built on an edifice of lies. When politicians promise the American people, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. And 6 million people get their plans canceled against their wishes. Those are broken promises. When the President of the United States promises your premiums will drop $2,500 and instead the average premium rises $5,000 and deductibles go up $5,000, people are hurting because of Obamacare. And Bernie's solution, you know, I'm reminded of an old Saturday Night Live skit with Christopher Walken, where they're playing in a band and he keeps ringing the cowbell. And every time they record it, his solution is more cowbell, more cowbell. It was government control that messed this all up. And Bernie and the Democrats' solution is more cowbell, more cowbell. Yeah, it didn't work when we said you wouldn't get your plan canceled. Yeah, it didn't work when we said your premiums would be cut. But give government even more power. We can do better. I believe we're going to honor the promises we made to the American people, and we're going to repeal what Bill Clinton called Obamacare the craziest law in the world. Instead, we're going to give you choice, let you buy insurance across state lines, expand health savings account, make insurance portable, block grant Medicaid to the states so you can have experimentation health savings accounts so we can meet your needs, put you in charge of your health care with your doctor, not government. That's what this election was about, and now it is incumbent on all of us, Republicans and Democrats, to deliver on the promises made to the American people.
People like me who depend on their Medicaid. She got Medicaid through the Obamacare expansion of Medicaid. We've all heard you criticize Medicaid. What happens to Carol?
Well, what I said, Jake, is that Medicaid isn't working for millions of people, and Obamacare made Medicaid worse by expanding the wait list, by jamming more people on it. You want to talk about replacement? There's widespread agreement on replacement plans. Number one, allowing people to purchase across state lines, giving you more choice. Now, Bernie said he opposes that. He doesn't want to let you buy insurance in other states. Number two, expanding health savings accounts so you can save in a tax-advantaged way to meet your own health care needs. Number three, making health insurance portable so that it goes with you from job to job. I imagine, ma'am, at some point you had insurance with a job. If insurance was portable right now, federal tax law incentivizes most of us get our insurance from the government. And if you lose your, or not from the government, from our employer rather, and if you lose your job, you lose that insurance. One of the best solutions to the problem of pre-existing conditions is making health insurance portable so it goes with you. You know, when you lose your job, you don't lose your car insurance, your life insurance, your house insurance. There's no reason to lose your health insurance. And if your insurance is portable, it goes with you, it's affordable, you have choices. Now, notice Bernie's solution. We want more doctors. We all agree on more doctors. He says, well, the government needs to hire more. You know, I can point to something that works on that. In Texas, we passed tort reform. We fundamentally limited lawsuits and lawsuit abuse. And you know what we've seen? We've seen the number of doctors increasing dramatically. We've seen medical malpractice premiums dropping. Those are the kind of solutions supported at the state level that will result in more doctors. But Obamacare is discouraging people from going to medical school and training to be doctors.
Carol?
Thank you. I have multiple sclerosis, but could not afford insurance. Without the treatment or medications I need, I had problems with walking, with my speech, and my vision. When the Affordable Care Act was passed, I moved from our home state of Texas, because they refused to expand Medicaid, to Maryland. And within 2 weeks, I started receiving treatments through Medicaid and am now well enough to work as a substitute teacher. Senator Cruz, can you promise me that you and the Republican leaders in Congress will actually have a replacement plan in place for people like me who depend on their Medicaid? In other words, I like my coverage. Can I keep it?
Well, Carol, thank you for sharing your story, and congratulations on dealing with MS. It's a terrible disease, and congratulations on your struggles dealing with it. You know, if you look at Medicaid, more than half of the people who've been covered under Obamacare have been under Medicaid. And the problem is Medicaid is a profoundly troubled program. And so it may be working well with you. But I'll tell you nationally, the health outcomes under Medicaid are really poor. Nationally, 54% of doctors won't take new Medicaid patients. Nationally, dental care appointments for moms are denied at a 63% rate on Medicaid. The denial rate for private insurance is 4%. And Medicaid patients are almost twice as likely to die from medical treatment as those with private health insurance. The solution for people who are hurting, I believe, we should have a system that allows as many people as possible to be on the private health insurance of your choice rather than Medicaid, because the Medicaid outcomes are not working and people are suffering. And what's happened also, it's really quite striking. Because Obamacare dramatically expanded Medicaid, many of the people who had been on Medicaid, many of the people who are really suffering and needy, have found their wait times increasing. In fact, in Illinois, on Medicaid, over 700 people have died on the waiting list for care for Medicaid. So I'm glad that you're receiving health care. I can tell you a great many of the people on Medicaid aren't, and I'd much rather see a system where we can have millions of those on Medicaid getting health insurance. And the only way they can is if we have competition so that rates are lower so that you can afford to have health insurance.
Senator Sanders.
We heard from a woman who runs a hair salon in Fort Worth who can't afford to provide health insurance to her workers and for herself. We hear a story now about a woman who has to leave her own state, go to another state, because that state is providing Medicaid. My friends, you are living, I know you don't know this by these stories, you're living in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, where the rich are becoming phenomenally richer, while we have 43 million people living in poverty and the middle class is in decline. These stories are obscene. They should not be taking place in the United States. Now, are there problems with Medicaid? Of course there are. But I will tell you something. To those Republican governors around the country who told poor people that they would not be able to, for the first time in their lives, in many instances, get access to health care, to be able to go to a doctor when the federal government paid for the first 3 years at 100%. I hope that those governors sleep well at night, because I don't know how many people lost their lives as a result of their decision. So once again, what we are looking at is a dysfunctional system. We spend more, we get less. People who work hard have no health insurance. People have to move from one state or the other. This country finally is going to have to do, in my view, what every other major country does. And yes, I believe, Ted, health care is a human right. And I believe that this country has got to join every other major country and say, you can stay home and get quality care because you're an American. You can run your small business well and get care because you are an American. That is where we have got to go.
Well, you know, when Bernie says, well, Medicaid has problems, you want to talk about people who lost their rights. 742 people in Illinois were put on a waiting list for Medicaid after Illinois expanded its Medicaid, Barack Obama's home state, and they died awaiting care under Medicaid. Why? Because Medicaid is ration care, those wait lists. You know, Bernie likes to talk about Medicare for all, but let me be clear what his program is. It's Medicaid for all. It is rationed care nationally, and you want to know what that looks like. He keeps pointing to other countries. Let's look at, for example, the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, a 2001 report, noted that 39% of women over 80 in the United Kingdom receive surgery for breast cancer, compared to 90% of the women under 50. And that women under, or men and women under the age of 55 were 2.5 times more likely than those over 75 to receive cancer treatments. More than 80% of older patients in the United Kingdom believe they're discriminated against by their government-run health care. You want to know what rationing looks like? It looks like Medicaid. It looks like the people who are suffering. And if you look at this country, across this country, we have 291 million people, roughly, that are covered by insurance. I don't think we should be screwing up the insurance of millions of Americans and putting them under rationing. And that's what Obamacare has moved us down the road to doing, and it's not working.